Hello, you beautiful humans and beautiful beings behind the humans. Dan here, tuning in for our March AMA Ask Me Anything community update. The last 4 weeks really feels like it's been half a year that's gone past. And it's been really beautiful to see all the movement playing out and to constantly remember the stillness that always remains. And so there's a few things on the update that I'd love to speak to. The first one is I thought I'd introduce and explain our current team roles within the team, give you a window into what the roles are of the current people within the team. This may or may not have been clear to some of you, and so currently you have myself, Sarah, and Lauren. And the three of us are co-founders of Yes And as we know it today. In addition to this, each of us are facilitators and coaches, so developmental integral coaches and facilitators. And then in addition to that, we have these other roles. We've been doing a fair bit of work around really defining these roles, because often when you have a smaller team and everything needs to be done, these roles are often less defined and kind of making things happen. So we've been doing a fair bit of work around that. And Sarah's additional role to co-founder and facilitator and coach is to be across the marketing, social media, community communication via email, graphics design. And she's also been receiving some beautiful help for the festival specifically from Kate Chowdhury. And that's been amazing. Thank you. Then there's Lawrence, and Lawrence, broadly speaking, is our events and course coordinator. So he is the interface between the community that attends the courses, or the speakers and artists for the festival, and any events that we run. Lawrence is the one coordinating, pulling the strings behind the scenes there. Quite a large role, as is the marketing piece. And then there's my role, and I've always struggled to place my role into any categories. However, what came through when we were doing some of the exercises around the roles was, I guess, I bring in a bit of a flow around more of an overview perspective, and you could call this the lower right quadrant potentially. Overview perspective of how everything fits together and what's the experience of the community member. How do our three circles of community, from the subscribers to the members community, members circle to the coaching circle, how do they flow between those, and is that fluid for the community member? How do our offerings flow from one to the other, and does that make collective sense as to what would be useful and supportive for the community? Where are we going? What's our vision for the next 4 to 5 years? And whilst a lot of these things, I provide a layer of that overview. However, all three of us, Sarah, Lawrence, myself, have involvement in the development of Yes And, in the vision of Yes and in the flow. I just might see these little bits and pieces. So that's our role. And we've also identified, as a result of doing that work, we've identified that we will be, I'm just going to mention this here now, and we're going to get clear as to what that role is going to look like. We will be looking for a Yes And offerings coordinator, kind of an operations/logistics role, but more so an offerings coordinator that will be involved in coordinating things like our retreats and some of the courses. So some of Lawrence's role, and that will really allow for some space for our current team members to focus more clearly on development and facilitation, and bring the best possible, most supportive offerings to the community. For the next point here, we've realized that Yes and has gone through a phase over the last 2 years. The phase prior to that, where it was just myself, 85% of what you're currently seeing of Yes and was not happening when it was just myself. The capacity just was not there. But having these beautiful co-founders come in together has made the last 2 years possible, and what you currently see of all of the offerings is only possible because of this group coming together. The last 2 years has been around growth, and pretty rapid growth. Just looking at what do people need and how do we get that out there to them. From the Listen course to the Mastering Self course to the retreats in person, not just online courses, but in person experiences, but also deep work and deep practice and deep play. And then there's a festival as well. In all of that, and in that phase, what's really there, whilst all four quadrants, the individual space, the collective we culture space, the doing upper right quadrant space, and the system space, they're all at play always, as many of you would know. However, there was a large emphasis on the doing. For us to bring those offerings forth, there was a lot that needed to be done with a small team. And so we highlighted and identified that, hey, there's been a big emphasis on the doing space. And actually, where we want to put some more energy into now is culture. And we realized that we would come onto calls with one another as a team, and we just knew things needed to get done. We would have cafe sessions that were supposed to happen once a fortnight. We would check in with one another. How is everyone going and how is everyone being? And just have a conversation about the weekend and whatever else. They would happen, but to a much smaller extent and not to the degree that we would love them to happen. So we are shifting a focus. The doing will continue to happen, and however, we are shifting a focus onto culture, onto the culture that we are contributing to, and that includes not just the three of us, but each and every one of you, the culture that we're contributing to as to how we approach being in life, and in that including how we are being and showing up in work, and the energy that we are bringing to that. Because if we are speaking to a new way of living and being and working, and we're ushering all of the conversations that each of you would be having with people around you and opening people's eyes to actually a new way of being, coming from a place of stillness. If we're ushering these people through from an old paradigm of do, and what we ushered them through to are a bunch of spiritual people that are just as busy in doing, it's just the same thing, and as Sarah would like to say, but in a different jacket. And so it's really about living the work part of it as well. And where it can be a little bit difficult when we're involved in work that we absolutely love, it can feel like, well, we're making a change, we're making an impact here. It's okay, let's go for it. But we're realizing we want to contribute to collective culture in a generative way for the individual, for the collective, and between one another. Have the challenging conversations. We're realizing that the nectar really lies in having the challenging conversations between one another and not shying away from those, receiving all of the nectar within those challenging conversations, within the organization, but also personally within relationships outside the organization. It is where the nectar lies. So that focus on culture, what we've introduced actually are these check-ins with every single call. There's a 30-second check-in from each person. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It's simply what, how are you being is the question that we're asking. And how am I being today? Had a great night's sleep and feeling super re-energized. And feeling good. And what this has already done is it's opened up the avenue for conversation around, ooh, we need to change something about this. If this person's feeling this way, either they require support right now or something the role needs to change, or we can map out a plan for the next 6 months where we do bring in someone that takes on particular roles and so on. So it's always emerging, always evolving, and we're constantly students in this process and learning. There was a community question, so I'm moving on now. There was a community question, a question from the community around the Danville Retreat. So what's the intention behind the 21-day Danville Breath Mastery Retreat? Why did YSAN engage this? So the Danville is a master in the field of breath work, 40 years plus experience from the US. He was Tony Robbins' breathwork teacher. Initially, Sarah and I wanted to do the facilitation program and receive the certification. He's got a retreat in Mexico, 21-day retreat. That's a part of the certification process, and it was the only one available. For particular reasons, we were unable to travel to Mexico to do it, and so we simply reached out via Instagram. Hey, we would love to host you here. We do retreats, we do festivals, we do events. So we'd love to have you. That was the initial intention behind it. Now, when we sat down and thought about it a little more, relationships are a huge part. It's where the festival is incredibly powerful. Relationships we build with community, being in person with a large group of people, and coming into deep rest, deep work, deep practice, deep play together is huge. The relationships we build with speakers and artists that are all involved in the festival have just been building for the last 4 years of the festival. The retreats are no different. Those that have attended the YSAN retreats would know exactly what we're talking about and how that deepens the relationship in the moment with community. With Danville, we wanted to kick off a relationship moving forward. Already what's coming off that is a potential 21-day retreat in the UK, given how well this retreat has been received here. It's also, we believe that the work that is being done here is true work that we continue to refine in a way that it carries less spiritual materialism and spiritual ego with it, whilst seeing all of it as beautiful when it does arise. Building this relationship with Danville is helping with exposure to the work of this community, including you guys, and the work of YSAN. So already people have been wondering, how did you possibly get Danville to come for a 21-day retreat and so on. So the association there has been beautiful, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with Dan to this point. So that's been the intention. Hope that answers the question. And if there's any more clarity required around that, please let me know. And if there's any questions about anything else, please let me know. Podcast. We've released a podcast, and the podcast, just to refine this, the podcast is kind of this soft launch using the festival, and it's our festival podcast, where there have been conversations that have been had by Lawrence with some of the speakers from this year, and then also some of the workshops and talks from previous festivals on there. Check that out. There's a whole bunch of beautiful information and knowledge and wisdom that's coming through there. That podcast is something in the same way as YSAN does anything else, and it is an emerging process where we will be building and developing it, and we'll probably lean into a more solid launch with that podcast, an official launch with that podcast beyond the festival, and when there is the appropriate capacity by the current team, given that the festival itself is a huge holding a lot of space for us in that sense. So that's the festival podcast. Marion, we wanted to give a huge thank you to Marion. Marion has played a massive role in YesN and contributed to YesN in a massive way from about 2 years ago. The same time that Lawrence and Sarah and myself came together, Marion was a part of that group. She was actually a client of mine, one-on-one coaching. She attended the Arctic Leadership Program that we offered up, and she was a beautiful part of that. And on that trip, she sat there saying, I'm just thinking of ways that I can be a part of this next year. And that linked in mind for me all of the opportunities that could potentially be there for her around one-on-one coaching. She wasn't coaching at that point in time, and that was just over 2.5 years ago. So it was a really beautiful journey, and to work with Marion and have her contribute in such a significant way to YesN. She will always be a part of the DNA, and Marion is on maternity leave right now. Her situation was actually contributing to YesN in the beautiful way that she did with the amount of time and energy she was spending on YesN, together with running her own clinic of, I think, close to 15 people, speech pathology clinic, so her own business. And then the bubble was coming along. And so for now, Marion's off being a mama and really allowing herself to drop into that, and refining where her focus lies. And so we're super grateful for all of that work. Thank you so much, Marion. And off the back of that, I'd love to officially announce Paula Adams, so one of our community members from the UK. Paula is now officially a part of the team, fully in charge of finance, and we are so grateful to have Paula put her hand up to jump on and support and be a part of the team in this way, using the festival as the initial big project, but will also be sticking around beyond the festival as well. Thank you so much for being a part of the team, Paula, and we're really looking forward to kicking off this journey with you and working with you. Any questions, let me know, and that is all for the March update, and we will be back for the April update in 4 weeks' time. And I do want to include around the pods, the way that we are linking up and allowing the pods to fit in to the coaching circle session. You have your one-on-one intimate session coaching with your coach. Then, this is for everyone in the coaching circle. Then you have your small group pods, which you are checking in with each other. So what's been challenging, this one-on-one work, maybe for a minute or two each, and then speaking to whatever that month's coaching circle topic is going to be in the big group call. And then we come into the group call and we share our discussions and perspectives there. Have a beautiful month, everyone, and see you all soon.